From Hamilton Place Strategies in Washington, D.C., this is the HPS Insights Podcast.
Good morning. It's Friday, February 19th. You're listening to the HPS Macrocast. Tony Prado here, John Fagan and Brendan Walsh from Markets Policy Partners. Our friend John Dick from CivicScience is with us once again. John, great to have you here with us. We're going to get into where people think about what they're how they think about the world around them right now, and how coming out of I think maybe the worst parts of the worst episodes of COVID, what it tells us about what their future economic activity, what future economic activity might bring from people as we exit winter and enter spring pretty soon. John, one thing we've seen is a lot, stronger economic data than people were expecting. Even really before, hitting some of the full force of stimulus. But the numbers have been more robust than people have expected. We're seeing economic projections for 2021 being revised up. How are the markets seeing this?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. This is the debate that's playing out, and we saw it in the data this week in retail sales in particular. The great spike in retail sales, a huge snapback from the disappointing December numbers that we've seen. Certainly, confidence and survey-based, like purchasing managers indexes, those kind of gauges, looking very upbeat and anticipating the rebound. We've seen a little bit of squishiness in the labor market, unfortunately, although non-farm payrolls, importantly, looked a little bit better in January from the December downside. So all of this generally shows that the U.S. economy is kind of leaning into this recovery. And on the other side, we've just had a litany of Fed speakers and communications. We got the January meeting minutes this week, and we got Treasury Secretary Yellen's interview on CNBC yesterday. And the policymakers have been uniformly focused on the downside risks, the uncertainties to come, talking about how stimulus is still very much needed, both on the monetary and fiscal side, to get us to this bright future that the data seems to be flashing forward to, that the markets are obviously keeping their eyes on and pricing in on the horizon here. And so we've seen this process of markets trying to shift from a very much liquidity-driven reflationary trade, which carried the day and filled the sails of the markets and brought them back to all-time highs, really, through even the darkest days of the pandemic, into a much more growth-driven kind of dynamic. And as we mentioned last week, this is exemplified by the outperformance shifting from the tech-heavy NASDAQ, which has your sort of pandemic winners in it, to the more growth-oriented, growth-dependent Russell 2000, which are your small-cap stocks. The outperformance of the Russell 2000 is emblematic of market participants leaning into this growth story. We can also see it in the dollar. The steep downtrend in the dollar has been arrested, and the dollar has not broken to multi-year lows for quite a number of weeks here. This has been a 2021 story. Dollar weakness trend has held up. And this is coinciding with an increase in longer dated treasury yields, most recently fueled by real yields. So even as the inflationary impulse is stronger, it seems to have abated here this week as the market-based gauges of inflation expectations like TIPS break-evens have stalled out, but real yields have continued to go higher, meaning that's a real yield. And that's been supportive of the dollar. That is very much looking at a growth-oriented future. And, for equity markets, it's kind of like, we've joked about this in the past, it's kind of like the old Miller Lite, tastes great, less filling. I mean, it changes the character and maybe the pace of the upside of equity markets, but a full-on, it's when growth is getting better, you have a different composition of the rally, but it's still a positive environment for
directionally. It's hard to make a case that directionally it's not going to continue. And just knowing the level of support out there, and like the kinds of things that you think about when if you think about reversals are, impaired balance sheets, right? Like we're not seeing impaired balance sheets. We're seeing healthy balance sheets.
Yeah, and we saw the rising interest, rising treasury yields, and a stronger dollar through a lot of 2018. This was a time when everyone and their brother and their sister thought that the dollar was going to keep falling off the table. It turned a counter trend move into a much more durable uptrend, and that was based on the idea of U.S. economic outperformance and the U.S. divergence trade. And after a period of digestion, where some of the froth was blown off, equity markets followed the dollar up and followed treasury yields up. It's certainly not an unknown phenomenon, but it would be a little bit different than the kind of dynamic that predominated last year.
And Tony, the point on balance sheets is really important. So 2020 was record issuance for the high yield market, but a lot of that was actually the better high yield companies issuing debt just because they could get it and just to shore up the balance sheet and for the future, what is ahead. 2021 is also on record pace, but about 15% of it is the lowest rated triple C companies. So that's actually quite bullish, where the riskiest companies are able to borrow, and it's also again at record low rates for the high yield market. So there's just so much liquidity that there's not a lot of risk of companies of decent size going bankrupt. Small businesses are the ones that are having a problem. A company that can tap the debt market, the market's there for them.
John, how are people feeling about this? We know how, I mean, market participants are people too, but there are, but they're regular.
Are they?
Yeah,
Are they
regular? They're people too. We know some of them. Yeah.
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 Look, I really think one of the lasting stories of this pandemic is just going to be the resiliency of the American consumer. I mean, we see the retail numbers are incredible. I mean, it just to see that we're spending, and I don't mean overspending. I think it's been healthy. We're looking at it's very stable, right? I don't mean to by any means minimize. There are definitely large segments of the American population that are dealing with hardship right now because of this pandemic. It's kind of like around 25 to 29% of the population that is sort of decidedly worse off. When we look at a question we've been tracking very closely, which is essentially, are you better or worse off than you were financially before the pandemic? 74% of Americans are the same or better than they were before March of last year, right? And that's showing up in these retail numbers clearly, but and those numbers moved for sure over time. But even in the last month, one of the trackers we have around what and there's both a real read in it and sort of some subtext to it, which is what would you do with another stimulus check if you got one and you were eligible? What's fascinating isn't so much the splits that 38% of Americans say they would pay down debt or pay bills, 29% would save or invest that money, and 20% would purchase necessities, and there's a few other smaller ones after that. And those splits are interesting, but what's really interesting is it has not budged in 2 months. We asked the same thing in December, we asked the same thing in January, we asked the same thing in February. It's not to say that the people who are in dire need of more stimulus aren't in more dire need than they were before, but there aren't more people who are in dire need, right? Yeah. And I think that says a lot about where we've sort of leveled, where the equilibrium sits in the market right now.
Well, I know for myself and John, MPP was able to break even because Tony gave us a break on the absolutely usurious rates that he charges us at Hamilton Place Distraction.
But yeah, the consumer seems to.
Yeah, the office space that none of us are using.
Oh, Stuart called me yesterday and said maybe March people are going to start coming back a little bit.
Yeah, I hope so. We'll see.
The other markers that we see, one question that really fascinated me is we asked whether they agreed with the IRS's decision not to extend the tax filing deadline this year like they did last year. And well over 2/3 of Americans agreed with the decision, which means, and again, that leaves us at that 27 to 29% who don't agree with it, which the saying we could actually probably use the relief of like a delayed tax deadline. But there's definitely that bifurcation we've talked about the last few times we've all been together. I mean, it's becoming calcified, I think, which people are in those two groups. And we're going to need policy and plans to sort of address both of them. But the majority of people are still in the positive column.
Yeah, and we always have to remind ourselves that there are segments of the population that are really in a tough situation, and hopefully the existing stimulus, COVID relief bill, and the forthcoming COVID relief bill, will help them along. But this is this is the Macrocast, and if it's sort of take a macro look at things, there's a huge part of the population that has resources, and they're spending, and they're still buying homes, building new homes, all the things that you fill a home with. Pretty soon we're going to see, outdoor activity, picking up around homes, also landscaping and all that kind of work that will come. So so that's those are the if you look at the broader economy, it has strength to it. I don't think there's any question about that. We do have to deal with the acute pain and get this, especially the small service businesses going, everything from the restaurants to the manicurists and pedicurists and haircutters and everything else. It's a huge part of our employment workforce, and we need to get them going again.
And that's what worries me about the relief bill. We're arguing about size, but to me, time and speed is much more important. People need the money right now.
Yeah.
If we have to have another month of debate, that's another month that people didn't get especially businesses and the people that really are in need didn't get the relief that they need right away.
I would add
just to go back to this. Just to go back to something you said, John, the propensity to save, that's really a key aspect, certainly in the debate between, the sort of Janet Yellen versus Larry Summers debate. Is this going to be an overheating risk of the economy? Paying down debt and saving isn't, would argue for the side of Yellen, which is this is going to be helpful, but not gasoline on some kind of economic fire here. But anyway, that's just part of the mosaic.
I would argue for more precision. If I had a magic wand too, is the way we think about it. Just looking, when we slice and dice all these numbers all day long, there's going to be people that and industries, categories that need it more. And I know we can't over engineer that because it's just going to slow it down even more. So if it has to be a blunt force instrument, it has to be a blunt force instrument. I do think the micro affects the macro in some of these categories. Like one thing that troubles us, and we don't talk nearly enough about, is the outsized impact this pandemic has had financially on women in the workforce. Women are just stating significantly higher levels of economic hardship, financial hardship. They're going to be the ones much more likely to say we're going to purchase necessities or pay bills with the stimulus check when we get it. If you think a lot of those kinds of service industry jobs that have been lost, but then play that out. Those are the same people, when you talk, Tony, about the salons and some of these other smaller businesses, those are the eventual consumers of those places. Mm-hmm. So we can reopen them. But if the patrons of those establishments aren't with the financial wherewithal to support them, we don't really move the ball very, very far. So there are lots of little hidden things underneath what are seemingly some otherwise positive numbers that we all just have to have our heads around.
Yeah, I think I saw your data on that, and it is potentially devastating, right? The impacts are asymmetric. Women are more likely to leave their profession with schools closed, childcare, enormous childcare challenges. Women are more likely to make the decision to leave employment and go home to help with both the care and education of their children, and that's just a fact. And beyond the sort of unfairness of that, and why the father isn't, equally likely to make that decision. The problem is, if you think about this as the talent in the workforce, if you just assume sort of a natural distribution of talent among women, like some are brilliant, some are in the fat middle of good and average, and then there's the tail of not as talented. Same natural distribution among men. But if women disproportionately take themselves out of the workforce, then we're replacing some of those highly talented women with less talent, with less talented men, right? You just kind of, you do that once or twice. It's not great. I wouldn't want to see it in my business. You multiply that by a few tens of millions, and then you're limiting the productive capacity of your economy. It's really dumb. It's dumb in these countries that for cultural reasons, keep women out of the workforce and limit the economic opportunities for women, because you're making sort of a unilateral decision to eliminate some of the best talent available to you. It'd be like saying we're going to have a baseball league, but we're not going to have players from the Dominican Republic. It's not going to be as good a baseball league.
Right.
And so anytime you're eliminating people from from the opportunities that your economy creates, you're limiting the productive capacity of your economy, and that over time lowers standards of living.
Yeah, I mean, getting kids back into school is the single most important thing that we as a nation can do. And the data shows globally that it's safe to do it. But even in DC, the teachers union is talking about next school year not being in person. The pain that it's doing both the economy, but most important to the kids, we're never going to rebound from it unless we get these kids in school.
Yeah, I agree. We're going to dive into more of John Dick's really insightful observations when we come back on the Macrocast.
Did you know it can take 5 years to reach a rare disease diagnosis, but even longer for Black and other people of color who face disparities in access to care and are underrepresented in clinical trials? On February 23rd, the Black Women's Health Imperative will host the full launch meeting of the first of its kind Rare Disease Diversity Coalition, backed by a steering committee of advocacy, community, and industry leaders. The time for action to combat the challenges facing minorities with rare disease is now. On February 23rd, the coalition will convene stakeholders from across the healthcare space and announce its recommendations for a path forward. To learn more about the coalition and join the meeting, visit rarediseasediversity.org.
And we're back on the Macrocast. Hey, John Dick, I've been something that we're going to be paying attention to for a long time. Obviously, as some of these transitions in the economy that were either accelerated or newly accepted. Whether it's in the kinds of things that we do in terms of our entertainment choices, but you've seen some things on some remote work and how it's maybe changed the way the way and the where of how people are working.
Yeah, I think some of the more surprising numbers I've seen, at least in terms of magnitude, surprised. Recently, some studies we've been doing on sort of remote work for future work phenomenon. 41% of U.S. adults who are currently in the workforce say they would be willing to accept a lower salary or a pay cut in exchange for the option to work remotely from anywhere they wanted. 14% of those people say absolutely, 27% say somewhat or very willing, but still 41% are in the consideration set to say, if I'm given the choice to reduce my pay to work from home, I would take it. Now, maybe those people have thought through that, right? The money they might be then otherwise saving from having to, the gas in their car driving to work, the parking that they might be responsible for, eating out for lunch lots of those other things maybe added up can offset the lower salary. But I think that's a profound observation about lots of things about our future of commercial real estate, or office grade real estate, parking, fuel, childcare, lots of secondary.
Mhm.
No, I can see it. I mean, coming from the tri-state area, the quality of life that people have that have to commute into the city, it's awful.
Yeah.
You have to get up at 5:30 in the morning to be at your office and 8 o'clock in the morning, and you're on a train, and it's super expensive. You have to have $1.5 million, $1.5 million house, which is like 3 bedrooms and 1,500 square feet. You can move to North Carolina and save $1 million.
Well, that's a great segue, Brendan, to the other finding in that same study, is that 30% of people said that if they could work remotely, they would move to a different state. And the answer is yes, absolutely. 30% of people say yes, absolutely. If I could always work remotely, I would move to a different state. Like, that's crazy.
No, I'm here.
living
We
in a
moved to
place they don't wanna
Florida for the winter. I mean, you can buy a 3-bedroom house with a pool in Florida for $200,000, because there's just limitless land. You're not on the water, but you're in Florida, and a lot of the country is that way. You McMansions sell, in the flyover states for $400,000.
You do have to live in Florida though, so there's that.
I would not do it. I'm happy to visit here for 3 months, but it's a goofy place.
I spent a lot of time in Florida, but every time I go, I feel like I see another Carl Hiaasen book waiting, or Elmore Leonard, but probably Carl Hiaasen.
I love Elmore Leonard.
A lot of great research and full on books about the phenomenon of how Americans used to relocate to follow economic opportunity, and how that seems to have stopped. Right, we go all the way back to the gold rush, and the westward movement, but even to our hometown, Tony, of Pittsburgh. How many people had to leave Pittsburgh to go to North Carolina or wherever for jobs? We've stopped doing that. And it's part of the, there's an underpinning of maybe some of the plight that's seen in parts of middle America that have somewhat been left behind, because those people used to leave to go where the jobs were, and now they're less likely to do that. This almost has like the reverse effect of that. It's like, you don't have to move if you don't want to for economic opportunity, right? You can move for personal, quality of life decisions, and your job will go with you. That's a fascinating phenomenon.
Wait, let me tell you something. We, even here at HPS, we have a new member of our creative team who we use as a freelancer, and we've hired full time. And and I've been sort of making the rounds with, I'm used to seeing our team in the office and getting 5 or 10 minutes to see someone and have a conversation with them and learn about their what's going on in their life away from work, and what the kinds of things that you learn about your coworkers when you're sharing space. You just learn so much more. So I've been setting up these 20-minute coffee Zooms with all of our team. Well, I'm talking to this new guy that we hired, and our creative operations are in California. The head of our creative is in California. I just assumed he's in California, and I learned only just because I did this coffee, he's in Alabama. And like, he's from Alabama. He want to move to a big city. He's wildly talented, one of the nicest guys you'd ever want to meet. And he and his wife are just, really happy to be able to live in Alabama. Now, problem with that is with a lot of businesses if you're on the business generating side, you benefit from network effects of being around other people in your business. You benefit sometimes on the creative side, but also those, I didn't have lunches and coffees and drinks with people entirely out of fun, right? A lot of it was to try to have loose conversations. You figure out what's going on, and you see opportunities to go develop business together. You can't do that from Alabama. It's not the same way. Or maybe you do it, it's a lot of work to do that. So sort of the network connections of people who, if you're in the movie business and you're in LA, or if you're in the software development business and you're in the Valley, those things actually do matter. If you are in the business of someone else delivering work for you to do, Here's your work, go do it and bring me back a finished product. You can certainly do that from anywhere in the world. You don't have to be in a location to do that. So I wonder about the sort of long-term, bifurcation of professional development opportunities.
Totally
From people
agree.
who don't get those opportunities.
Well, I just think both my own experience and also just watching how HBS works. You have a lot of kids that essentially just graduated college, and they learn from a 28-year-old, and they also learn from a, maybe like a 40-year-old, and you have that kind of mentorship, and that's how they progress on their career. If that 40-year-old is in Alabama, he's not going to be, or she's not going to be able to, have that same kind of ability to pass on their experience.
Yeah.
So that's what I worry. I think people who already are set up in their career can work from where they want, but you're missing the development of the incoming generations to teach them how to do things.
Well,
And that,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead, John.
But play that out though, because if everybody's distributed again, or some to some greater extent distributed, wouldn't they be able to replicate those kind of experiences wherever they are, because there will be other people like them in those places working, because everyone hasn't flocked to New York and DC and LA? I mean, I know, Tony, you and I are big believers both in the sort of the virtue of the office culture and the serendipity that creates. And I think you can have that, but can't you have smaller versions of that in places like Alabama, because if all of a sudden you're not an outlier because you're the only person in Alabama working in that field, there are other people like you. Do you create those smaller pods of opportunity maybe?
Yep. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think we're going to find out.
Yeah.
That's an important point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know many people. I have an enormous network, right? I mean, I've worked in Pennsylvania. I've worked in Washington, D.C. When you work on things like an administration and Capitol Hill and campaigns, you just end up meeting a lot of people. And the guys at the office sometimes they laugh. They used to play this game where if we were going to walk to one of our clients in Washington, they would bet on how many people along the way Tony would meet on the sidewalk who he knows. It's like, it was funny, and true. Like, it would happen, just walking down the sidewalk, and it's a reporter, it's someone I worked with in administration, it's someone, right? So I had, to your point, like, I have that, and I'm 50 something years old now, and I've got that forever. Like, I literally can go set up, house in the south of France and do my job. I have a bigger, network than most people have. I don't really even need to expand it much more. But I don't, but I don't know how you get a network that big unless you are doing those kinds of things where you're interacting with people, John. And it. I mean, we worked in politics together back in the day, and those are colleagues and friends that we still have today. So,
but John, does your data talk about younger people? I know personally now I don't want to live in New York City, but when I graduated, when I was in my 20s, I really wanted to. When I look at the people that the kids graduate in college, I think everybody that's in their 20s at HBS is really excited to get back to the office, because that's why they came to DC to do exactly what you're talking about, Tony. Some in their 40s might be, want to work in Alabama, but I don't think the recent college grads want to be remote. I think they want to be in the action, I guess.
Sure, but that cuts both ways, because they don't really want that because that's where their job is. It's because their job is an extension of what their social life is.
Important point, yeah.
Right. I mean, if we can go back to, and this is another person I know, Tony, from our days way back in the day, and I roll my eyes occasionally at it, was Richard Florida's creative classwork that he did 25 years ago. And Richard Florida, this whole premise was that people were going to flock to these cities that had sort of created this creative culture. And there was some extent, it was obtuse a bit, but the point was that younger people are going to go not just where the jobs are, but where the jobs are in places that have all of these other sort of cultural benefits around them. And it might be the cultural benefits first, and say, well, I could live in Austin, even though my job's I may choose Austin over New York, all other things being equal, just because Austin's cooler, and
Austin's frozen. Don't go to Austin.
well, fair point. Yeah, maybe bad example today, but you get the idea. Or maybe Asheville, right? Like Asheville might be a cooler, hipper place. It might not have the same, network of job opportunities that New York does, but I might choose that over that. So I would wonder to the young people in your company whether they're really they want to go back to the office to do work, or because the office is sort of the social opportunity.
Yeah. That was my point. They want to get back to the social aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
No one really actually wants to do the work.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna. This is something we are going to keep a close watch on, and we keep just seeing how people feel about these decisions. I think we don't really know the consequences of them or how it's going to play out, but it is going to be fascinating.
Yep. There's going to be a lot of PhD dissertations written about the next 5 years.
It's going to be a rich field of study. Let's come back and close out with our last segment on the Macrocast.
Every 2 weeks, HPS measures U.S. adults' feelings and expectations for the economy. The CivicScience Economic Sentiment Index, powered by HPS, accurately measures movements in overall national economic sentiment and provides a more sophisticated alternative to existing economic sentiment indices. To learn more, contact us through hamiltonplacestrategies.com.
All right, back on the Macrocast. John Dick is like such a weird time right now. Like I feel like we're in a sentiment doldrums, where people are sort of steady where she goes. The economic sentiment index, I think you said it was like, this is the first time, and we've been doing this now for 8+ years.
8+ years. Yep.
Yeah. The first time we've had 4 consecutive weeks of a reading within a tight band. It's just been steady as she goes, of where people, how people think about the future right now.
I mean, and just to put a somewhat finer point on it, these readings are bi-weekly. So we have had essentially 8 consecutive weeks of economic sentiment within on our scale, a 1-point band, which we've never seen, I don't think, in those 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
A couple times I've seen 3 or so, which would be 3 consecutive readings, never 4. It's hard to infer from that exactly what's happening. Are we just at a simmer right now? Are people waiting? Is there wait and see? Are we maybe not quite as hypersensitive to the news cycle? So there aren't big ups and downs in reaction to whatever the president tweeted that morning, or some article that made its way around Twitter. It's tough to know, and it's also tough to know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. It might be okay that it's sort of stable. Because there are some good things happening in the economy, and it'll be interesting to see which direction it breaks when it does break. Are we going to start to climb? The last peaks we saw were in September, but those always felt irrational. Those always felt sort of almost dangerous, right? Because we knew this dark winter was going to come. We knew we were going to have this second wave of the virus.
Well, we kind of knew it. I'm not sure most people out there knew it, or
okay, fair point. Fair point. Well, then they had a false sense of security. Whatever it was false. This doesn't feel false. I mean, no. And it does feel like brighter times are ahead, but maybe the consumer isn't quite bought into that yet until they start to see it.
It seems like there's when I think about it, it seems like the shakeout of the COVID economy has been shaken, right? I mean, like if you're in a sector of the economy that was going to be, impacted by COVID, that's where you are, and you've been there for a little while. If you're not impacted by COVID, you've been not impacted by COVID for quite a while. And so it just seems like a collective wait until, we do get that, at least something like herd immunity with vaccinations, and then we start seeing some movement back towards, again, spring is always hopeful. People are in baseball stands. You feel better about the world. I know I feel better about the world if I see people in the stands at baseball games. I'll feel much better about the world if I could actually be one of those people in a stand at a baseball game with John Dick at PNC Park. I'll feel better about the world. But you could see that coming, and maybe we'll see we'll see that reflected in things like the ESI.
One area of hope I know is the apparel industry, which is one that got just crushed last year. But when we start, I mentioned last time we were together that we're studying this shift from goods to experiences and spending, which we know is going to happen this year at some point as people start traveling again or whatever. But the one area of goods that's going to benefit from a shift to experiences is apparel, because every one of those things I'm talking about doing, I'm gonna need to buy clothes for it. Trip to the beach, right? Concert shirts, I want to whatever the new baseball hats for PNC Park, and so there's just even some of the restaurant space, the entertainment, i.e. the theaters, those kinds of things, they've probably still got a longer road ahead of them. Restaurants will start to do much better as the weather clears up too, but there are those categories that have suffered a good bit, particularly like soft line apparel over the last year, that have really bright. They've got their challenge is an inventory planning challenge, right? What are people going to want to buy? What are the styles going to be? But yeah, there's definitely a sense that we're in a simmer moment, and then things are going to pop, which is good.
It's good. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, guys. Great Macrocast. Have a great weekend. We'll see you all next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to the HPS Insights podcast, produced by Hamilton Place Strategies. For the latest updates, follow us on Twitter at HPS Insights and follow us on the web at hamiltonplacestrategies.com.